Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is something that I've gotten away from, and it's too bad because it's been a really good series, and this is Kings and Generals, Japanese Advance on Burma Road, Pacific War number 22. The last one I did was Doolittle's Raid, and I think I dropped that beginning in November. It was a long time ago. May have even been beginning of October. Now that I think about it, I don't remember. I think it's beginning of November, but doesn't matter. It's been too long, and so I'm doing this one. So let's do it.
In the last few weeks, we've been covering a wide range of events that were happening in the Pacific War, from Ceylon in the Indian Ocean to the Solomon Islands in the South Pacific. But one of the regions that we have neglected during this time is none other than Burma, which saw heavy fighting during these last few weeks as the victorious Japanese advanced towards the Burma Road. The Chinese forces tried to stop them in their tracks, and the decimated British soldiers took new positions in defense of India. So today, we're going to cover the developments in the Burma Road campaign, as well as the decisive actions of General Joseph Stilwell. Your continued support allows us to expand our work, and we're so grateful for that. We're always eager to create more videos for you, and we think that you'll enjoy.
Sorry, I'm going to
The last time we left Burma, the fall of Rangoon had left the British and Burmese defenders retreating along the Irrawaddy River.
For some reason, when I do 720 on this, it glitches a little bit.
Along the Irrawaddy River. Thus, the Japanese had already fulfilled one of their main objectives of the campaign.
And I don't like the quality on that. So, back to 720. Maybe it was 1080 that glitches. I apologize. That was my stomach talking. Okay. It's doing this again. I just completely hate this thing.
The campaign, which was to cut off one of the main ports that supplied the Burma Road, the last of the Chinese lifelines. After a short period of consolidation, the 33rd Division then began its pursuit of the fleeing and decimated British units on March 12th, while the 55th Division headed to the Sitang Valley to directly advance on Toungoo. In the meantime, as we've seen, the Japanese also began an operation for the naval transportation of 2 full divisions, among other units and supplies, which would be carried out across March and April by Admiral Ozawa's fleet. Both divisions would travel to the Sitang Valley, with the 56th Division tasked to go further east towards Tongyi, while the 18th Division remained in reserve. On the other hand, General Alexander had a mission to hold Upper Burma for as long as possible, to cover the oil fields at Yananyang, and to keep contact with the Chinese. In that regard, the remnants of the Burma army had taken positions on Prome, with the 1st Burma Division coming from Toungoo to reinforce them. They were placed under the recently formed Burma Corps, commanded by Lieutenant General William Slim, which was only reinforced with a British battalion and a handful of planes. After the disastrous Indian Ocean raid, there were still fears of a possible Japanese invasion of Ceylon or India, so the British therefore decided to reinforce these places instead. And speaking of the Chinese, General Stilwell's CEF had taken positions on the Shan states and across the Burma Road, with the 200th Division assuming the responsibility of defending Toungoo by March 8th. Although the 5th and 6th armies were considered the best among the Chinese, the soldiers were inadequately equipped and some even poorly trained, but they compensated with their long experience fighting against the Japanese. At Toungoo, Major General Dai Anlan established an outpost at Oktwin a few kilometers to the south, and also sent a small detachment to the banks of the Kan River with the task of delaying the Japanese advance. Stilwell's plan was to immediately reinforce the 200th with other Chinese divisions in the 5th Army, but the American general immediately found himself at odds with his troops, who refused to follow his commands, and instead obeyed those of Lieutenant General Luo Zhuoying. Chiang Kai-shek, who was Supreme Commander of the China Theater, had actually appointed Luo to truly command the Chinese troops and to carry out his orders, so Stilwell's position as head of the CEF was merely symbolic. Despite this, he managed to cooperate with Luo and convinced the Generalissimo to send the 22nd Division and a detachment of the temporary 55th Division towards Toungoo, although the 96th Division was to keep safeguarding Mandalay. Thus, an imaginary line was established from Prome to Toungoo, and if one of these positions fell, the other would be left too exposed. Yet, despite Stilwell's actions, the reinforcements would fail to arrive in time, so Dai would have to face the full might of the 55th Division by himself. On March 18th, the first engagement occurred as the Japanese reconnaissance of the 143rd Regiment advanced on a bridge over the Kan River. There, the Chinese ambushed them and eventually forced them to retreat after inflicting many casualties. By night, however, the Japanese returned and slowly started to push the defenders back. The following day, the invaders had already captured Pyu and were preparing to attack Dai's outposts at Oktwin. On March 20th, the Chinese Motorized Cavalry Regiment made a last delaying position north of Pyu to allow Dai's timber fortifications to be completed. In result, the cavalry suffered enormous casualties and had to retreat directly to Toungoo, but the time they bought eventually paid off, as on March 22nd, the 112th Regiment finally started its assault on Oktwin, but made little progress against the staunch resistance of the entrenched Chinese battalion. To force them to retreat, the Japanese sent their cavalry around the left flank of the defenders, but another Chinese battalion in reserve counterattacked and managed to stabilize the front line. A heavy bombardment and several assaults followed in the next few days, but the Chinese could not be pushed back. Only a second flanking maneuver on March 23rd, this time against the right side of the Chinese, could put some heavy pressure on the defenders. The Chinese then continued to resist until nightfall, and finally fell back to their main line on Toungoo by March 24th. But that same day, as the Chinese retreated, the 143rd Regiment, with the help of the local Burmese, got to advance through the jungles west of Toungoo towards the north of the city, capturing the lightly defended Kyungon airfield, and thus encircling Dai's men. This forced the Chinese general to concentrate his men within the city walls of Toungoo, with his headquarters moving to the eastern bank of the Sitang River to secure an escape route eastwards. At dawn on March 25th, the Japanese commenced their assault against all three sides of the city, trying to force the defenders towards the Sitang, where they would be annihilated. The besieged Chinese again offered staunch resistance, but by night, some Japanese troops had infiltrated the northwestern part of the city. The following day, a renewed Japanese assault managed to take the southwestern corner of the city, but failed to make further progress due to the large amount of losses. Chinese counterattacks against the lost territories also failed and cost the defenders many lives, something that allowed the invaders to secure the whole western part of the city. A heavy bombardment of the remaining Chinese positions followed in the next days, which inflicted heavy casualties on the defenders, but the Japanese couldn't capitalize on this as they had suffered many losses as well. On March 26th, the 22nd Division also arrived to the north of Yadesha to relieve the besieged 200th Division, thus threatening the position of the 143rd Regiment and forcing them to send a battalion to block the advance of the Chinese soldiers. Yet, to Stilwell's surprise, the 22nd refused to follow his commands and attack the invaders, as Chiang had instructed them to never go on the offensive. 2 days later, with the 22nd still not moving, the Japanese were reinforced by some heavy field artillery, with which they managed to destroy many Chinese strongpoints. Despite this, the fierce defenders continued to hold on to their positions on the eastern side of the city.
The Chinese have impressed the hell out of me. Everyone seems to, and I've went over this before, this isn't anything new, but everyone seems to be in this constant retreat, and the Japanese are always attack, attack, attack. The Chinese have really held out here. which lets you know they had some serious fighters. They just didn't have the equipment to really kind of, I don't want to say go toe-to-toe with them, because they are going toe-to-toe with them, but to be able to kind of turn the tide and maybe win a little bit or have better success, which it's not their fault they don't have the equipment. You just wish that you see their willingness to fight. You wish that somebody else would give them the equipment. But then again, no, we can't have our equipment in the hands of another country. You know, oh, it's national security.
But at the same time, the 56th Division finally arrived to support the attack on Toungoo and then continue their drive towards the Shan states. During the night of March 28th, the 56th moved to the eastern bank of the Sitang River at Wegyi and headed towards Dai's headquarters. If this position fell, then the 200th would be completely encircled, so the general sent a battalion to reinforce the defenders there. The tenacious Chinese soldiers fiercely resisted against the simultaneous assaults of the 55th and 56th Divisions, but by March 29th, opposition on the eastern bank of the Sitang had been overrun. Facing complete annihilation, Dai then had no other choice but to order the withdrawal of his troops to the east and then to the north along the river. By nightfall, the Chinese began to move out of Toungoo after a 12 days long stubborn defense of the city, the longest defense of the entire Allied campaign. On March 30th, as the battered 200th Division joined the 22nd Division at Yadesha, the Japanese finally occupied the city and ended the hard-fought and costly Battle of Toungoo. Meanwhile, the 33rd Division had amassed in front of Proma by March 27th. To relieve pressure on the Chinese, General Alexander had sent some forces under Brigadier Cowan to attack the invaders, capturing Pongde by March 29th. Yet they quickly found themselves encircled, and after the Chinese retreat from Toungoo, they had to fight their way back to Proma, leaving vehicles and equipment behind. The loss of strength suffered in the retreat forced Alexander and Slim to push back all their forces closer to Proma, where efforts were still being made to transport vast stores of supplies and resources to Mandalay. Even worse, they had lost air support after a series of strong air raids against Magwe that forced the British to evacuate their aircraft towards Chittagong. With Toungoo lost and his forces weakened, Alexander then met with General Wavell and explained to him the situation, with both men agreeing that there was no point in holding Proma. But before the British could retreat, the 215th Regiment launched its first probing attacks on April 1st. This attack was so successful that the Indians were left panicked, and in their confusion, the whole 63rd Indian Brigade withdrew from the town, causing a domino effect in which all the British forces began to pull back from Proma towards Nawinchang. By April 2nd, the British had taken new positions on Alanmyo, but Alexander knew that they had to keep retreating northwards. Thus he decided to further withdraw to a new line ranging from Minhla to Tondwingi, just in front of Magwe, successfully establishing defensive positions there by April 8th. In the meantime, Stilwell had travelled to Chongqing to demand Chiang either to relieve him or to grant him independent command over the CEF. In response, the Generalissimo quickly appeased him, granting him the full authority he requested, and even suggesting to go to Burma to make that clear for the Chinese officers. With his desired authority secured, Stilwell now planned to stop the Japanese advance at Pyonmana. By April 6th, this position would be held by the 96th Division, covered by the battered 200th Division to the northeast of the town, and with the 22nd Division falling back slowly from Yadesha towards the northwest of Pyonmana. Once the invaders had engaged the 96th, then the three divisions would launch a coordinated counterattack to destroy the enemy forces. Yet the British retreat completely ruined his plans, forcing him to stop any offensive preparations. Furthermore, Alexander requested a Chinese division to defend Tondwingi, and although Stilwell had agreed to his request, none was sent due to the disillusionment of the Chinese towards the British defenders. Meanwhile, General Ida expected that the Chinese would seek a decisive engagement south of Mandalay, so he
What does it mean, the disillusionment of the British? Is that because I'm eating peanuts in the shell? Apologies. Are they disillusioned with them because they're always retreating? They're never really putting up much of a fight, and the Chinese soldiers are? Because if that's the case, I get it. Yeah, I wouldn't want to go fight next to those guys either, because they always seem to be running. And I can't have that person to my left and to my right fire a couple shots. We get, we have to duck them because we're getting return fire. And all of a sudden they're like, all right, this was fun, see ya. And they just take off. It's like, okay. That's my guess.
He had decided to send the 56th Division eastwards to encircle the defenders and take Lashio, while the 18th and 55th Divisions advanced towards Mandalay, and the 33rd continued up the Irrawaddy to annihilate the Burma army. Immediately, the 56th Division of Lieutenant General Watanabe Masao crossed the Sitang River, and in the next few days overran a small Chinese garrison at Mochi, thus forcing the temporary 55th Division to pull back to Borlake. To counter the Japanese offensive, Stilwell sent the 93rd Division to reinforce the poorly trained 55th, and Chiang ordered the 66th Army to Mandalay, but both forces would arrive way too late. Watanabe had already sent some companies to encircle the 55th, and on April 17th his forces fell on the Chinese and routed them. 3 days later, the Japanese had gotten to Loikao and Chongyi unopposed, with the road to Lashio completely open. At the same time, the 33rd Division of General Sakurai was also making rapid progress. After repelling the first Japanese probing attacks against Kokogwa on April 10th, Alexander rapidly saw the center of his line disintegrate as the Japanese gradually pushed the 1st Burma Division towards Magway, where it was decisively defeated 5 days later. This left Yunnan completely exposed, with the 214th Regiment establishing itself to the north over the Pinchong, and with the 1st Burma Division and 7th Armoured Brigade trapped inside the town after a long withdrawal in really hot temperatures. In response, Slim ordered the burning of the Yunnan oil fields, and urgently asked Stilwell to send a division to save the now encircled British defenders. The 38th Division of Lieutenant General Sun Yijien quickly was in the area, so it was brought forward to relieve the besieged division. On the morning of April 18th, while the Burmese were outflanked and repeatedly attacked under a dense pall of smoke, the 38th Division and the 7th Armoured Brigade tried to push back the Japanese from the Pingchong, but were continuously repelled by the invaders. By afternoon, however, the Chinese attacked again with great tenacity and got as far as Twingon, finally repelling the 214th Regiment and even fighting into Yunnan itself. Surprised as they were by the fighting spirit of their allies, the 1st Burma didn't waste any time and got to escape from their encirclement through the Pinchong by April 19th. Although Sakurai's men had suffered many casualties against the determined Chinese soldiers, Sun finally had to order the withdrawal northwards, covering the British as they escaped. Despite this, Stilwell and Alexander were still planning to counterattack Magway with the 17th Indian Division, while the Chinese launched their main offensive from Pianmana. But upon learning that the 6th Army had been overrun and was now withdrawing eastwards, Stilwell had to scrap his offensive plans yet again. He then quickly sent the 200th Division towards Tongyi to stop the Japanese advance on Lashio, and also ordered the 96th Division to delay the invaders while the remaining Allied forces pulled back to Meiktila and Thesi. In doing so, the 96th was badly beaten, suffering heavy casualties as Japanese tanks caught them on the road on April 24th. At the same time, the 66th Army had been ordered to defend Lashio, but it failed to concentrate there in time. And to the south, the 200th attacked Tongyi and defeated the Japanese garrison there. Invigorated by their victory, the 200th then continued forward to Loilem, reaching the town on April 29th, but finding the enemy already there. Despite clearing another garrison from the town, the 148th Regiment had already entered into Lashio on that day, and the Burma Road was now in the firm hands of Matsuyama and his 56th Division.
The Chinese have impressed the hell out of me in this one. Not only are they standing their ground, they're retreating when they, I mean, there's their 12-day battle, but when they do attack, they really are doing some damage. They're very impressive. Yeah. I'm sure this is where I mean, they're trained, but this is probably where the equipment issue comes in, because they have the spirit, to fight. They really are impressing me. Props to that 200th Division and was it the 22nd? I forgot the number. Or 23rd? I don't remember. They were good.
Stilwell now had no other choice but to retreat, either back to Yunnan or to India. Meanwhile, with the deadly monsoon season approaching, Alexander and Slim had decided to do the same, with their goal being to reach India either through Imphal or via the Hukong Valley. This would deny General Ida the chance to have a decisive victory and thus destroy the Burma army, so a race would begin in the following weeks to escape Burma or get annihilated. Next week, we're going to take a short break to prepare for one of the most important naval battles of the entire war, so join us in 2 weeks.
We won't wait 2 weeks because it's already happened. So we'll just jump into it. We don't do what they tell us to do. We do what we tell them we're going to do. If that makes, I don't know what that makes sense. I don't know what that makes sense. Those words just came out of my mouth. I don't know what that makes. I don't even know what I said because it didn't make sense. I should be laid down and somebody should put a nail right through this cheek and through the other cheek into a concrete block, and then just take a shovel and just beat my genitals, because that I don't even know. I don't even have words right now. More stuff should happen to me. I think I'm dying. I think that's what it is. So anyways, we're going to stop that there. I'm going to try to speak again. And there's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to. All donations are appreciated. You can request videos if you do donate. If you don't, you still can. They just take a little bit longer to get to. And you can subscribe to the channel. I'm going to get back into trying to cover these. I'd love to put out one a week. It's just harder for me to get to them. But I'm going to. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.